2,000 years after the crucifixion, men claiming to be Christ are still making headlines. And one in particular has made more headlines than most. I've been given exclusive access to what the media has described as one of the world's most worrying cult leaders, Alan John Miller.
Actually, I've had a 2,000-year life and my name is Jesus as well. So I was born Jesus of Nazareth in the 1st century.
He has been compared to David Koresh, the cult leader whose followers died in a mass fire at Waco. He's been described as the face of evil, with apocalyptic predictions for the end of the world, who breaks up marriages and uses his followers for sexual favours.
A friend of mine came to me one day and he said, "I've met this bloke and I reckon he's Jesus."
You know, how arrogant is that, and what a wanker.
I have read he has a compound and his followers are setting up home with him. Alan John Miller, or AJ as he likes to be known, believes he is Jesus and he's deadly serious.
The Roman soldiers weren't certain as to whether I'd died or not yet, and so they actually speared the side of my body up into the heart.
And the world's media are taking note as he broadcasts his teachings on the net.
I'm Jesus, but most people call me AJ or Alan John Miller.
I'm claiming to be Jesus, that's true.
How does it feel, though, Jesus talking to us today and everybody watching at home and knowing that 99.9% of that audience are mocking you, or laughing at you, or saying, this man is bonkers and she must be as bad as him?
He's invited round the globe to teach divine truth with his partner, Mary Luck, who also believes she is reincarnated.
Oh my God, this is true. Like, this guy is Jesus and I remember it. And actually, I remember who I am. Like, I understand who I am now.
I had to agree to be filmed and hand over my footage in order for me to get exclusive access to AJ and Mary. I travelled 10,000 miles to his remote home in the Australian bush, an area known as the Bible Belt, to find out the truth behind the media claims. If in fact the divine truth is a cult, and AJ is a cult leader, then I wanted to know what AJ was trying to teach, why people were listening, and whether he is any different from the many men who have claimed to be Jesus before.
And if he's really Jesus and I really believe that, holy crap, I really got to embrace all the things he's saying.
AJ used to be a property developer and IT professional, but gave it all up 10 years ago in the realisation he is Jesus. 5 years ago, he met Mary Luck, who believes she is Mary Magdalene. We took a 3-hour drive into the heart of the bush and the Australian Bible Belt, to AJ and Mary's remote home, where it has been reported police were called because screams were heard from the Divine Truth community of worshippers who have set up home in his compound. I was eager to find out the truth behind these worrying claims. It was soon apparent there was no community, no worshippers, and no compound. It's incredible that a claim can be made like that, I find.
Yeah,
because I'm here
yeah.
and I'm seeing it for myself.
Yeah.
And
it was a purposeful claim. The people who made the claim stayed with us for 2 days, so they actually knew
that we just have a little 2-bedroom
have a
house with
house.
no fences and just we live here.
Christians and Muslims alike believe in the second coming of Christ, and for millennia, hundreds of men have professed to be Jesus himself. It is written in the Bible that Jesus said, "Take heed that no man deceives you, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ." I was interested as to know why AJ thinks he's any different.
in
Brazil.
Central America, there's a guy in Brazil, there's a guy in Russia, there's many people, there's even in Australia, I've had 3 people ring me up claiming to be me. So that was interesting. But in each case, they don't have the extensive knowledge that I have.
And they also don't display much love in their day-to-day activities or day-to-day life.
So
The
they won't
guy
be
in Brazil,
worshipped?
he just sits on his throne, actually. He has
With
a throne
a
with a
crown
on his head, and he sits there and people come and kiss his hand, and he wants to be worshipped. It's not right for somebody to value me more than they value themselves, for example.
Yeah.
Most of the time I get the opposite emotion, that I am stupid and an idiot, and why would anybody want to listen to me at all?
So, can you describe to me why you believe that you are Jesus of Nazareth?
Well, I don't believe I'm Jesus of Nazareth. I know I'm Jesus of Nazareth. I suppose it's the same way in which you know that you're Thomas Leader, and that is that you've had a life experience that you remember. And for me, it's the same kind of thing, with the exception that I remember my life of 2,000 years rather than just the 50 years that I am right now. So I remember my life in the first century, shortly after I was born, around 2 years of age onwards. I remember pretty clearly most of the events that occurred in my life in the first century. I remember a lot of the events that occurred in the spirit world through my 2,000 years of life. I don't remember all of them yet because I've still got some fear associated with remembering some of them. But and I also, of course, remember my life in terms of returning back to earth, how that felt, and the experience of that, and also then having this life. So it's all to me one life. It's not like I believe I was somebody else. I know who I am, and I know how old I am, and so forth. And I remember all of those events throughout my life.
But it's not just AJ who believes he has returned to earth. His partner Mary believes she is Jesus' wife from the first century, Mary Magdalene.
To tell the rest of the world very openly and plainly, I'm Mary Magdalene, there's only one of me, and I am here, I have come back. I wanted any other answer, and I searched, I shopped for other answers, I read books, I looked at, is it possible that I have a mental illness? Is it possible that somehow I've created this experience because I have a deep underlying desire to be special or have attention? I really looked at that, and I think that was fairly easy to resolve because I was pretty much hiding from everyone and hiding this experience from everyone for a number of years after we met.
Was coming to terms with the fact that you were Jesus easy?
No, very, very hard. There were many, many times when I just felt like it was impossible to actually even say. I'm completely aware that there are 1.5 billion Christians on the planet. I'm completely aware of how the majority of those feel about Jesus, that they believe Jesus is God. I'm completely aware that there are other people on the planet who don't even believe Jesus ever existed. And if you look at if you analyse anybody's opinions of Jesus on the planet today, I would say almost categorically that nobody knows who Jesus was. And here I was knowing myself, knowing who I am, and knowing that it basically rubbed out everybody's conception of what was true about Jesus. And so I spent the next 3 years trying to avoid my identity, but at the same time trying to teach God's truth. Basically, I'd talk to them for 4 hours about all these fascinating subjects, and they became more and more emotionally embroiled in the conversation and more fascinated by the conversation itself, only to find out in the end that this nutter in front of them thought he was Jesus, which then caused them to think that was a whole waste of 4 hours now, and they got very disappointed and very upset, as you can imagine. So I found it was far better just to say up front, I'm Jesus. Now let's get on with talking about some other subjects.
AJ and Mary were holding a 2-day seminar in a local town. I was keen to speak with the people that listened to their teachings to see if in fact AJ was a cult leader. It was soon apparent this was no amateur production. Though the seminars are free, AJ and Mary live by donation as to focus on spreading divine truth, and I'm told they use these funds to give to others and to distribute divine truth material. I saw no obligation to donate, but the people still did. AJ's teachings focused on people's emotional addictions, their fears of needing to be loved, to have control, their guilt, anger. and unless they confront and process these often extremely painful emotions, they will never be free, never know the truth that lies beneath, or feel the purity of their soul. I was interested to hear why, on the surface of it, people would choose such a painful spiritual path.
So can you tell me why you chose to find out more about the divine truth?
Basically because my life wasn't working. At this stage, our son had just died. Our son was stillborn, full term. And my partner just wanted to know. She just wanted to know why this thing had happened to our son. So she just went to a seminar on the Gold Coast. That's where we were living at the time. And she just went straight up to him. I didn't go because I was in judgment. I said, this guy saying he's Jesus, I thought, how arrogant is that? And what a wanker type thing. And not really realising now how arrogant I was, just prejudging someone. But, understandable, because this is what's the whole world's going through. And being out here for 2 years now, listening and meeting him and having conversations, he's probably the most loving person I've ever met in my life. I mean, look, I have a part in the death of my son, and because I didn't know anything about God beforehand. So it's not about AJ at the end of the day, because he's just a person who's saying he's Jesus. And it's taken me 2 years to sort of be honest that maybe he is, but then not get hung up on that, because it's about the message and the truths.
It must be very difficult to feel that you are, in part, responsible for the loss of something so very precious to you.
Definitely. It's not having any understanding or awareness that myself personally, you affect everything around you. It's not the other way around. It's not the world affecting me or affecting you. It's like he was saying, you're a common denominator in everything that happens in your life. But then we look for someone or something to blame, and I can understand why people blame God and say, well, how can you, as a loving God, let this happen? If you understand and know everything and you created everything, then why do you let pain and suffering continue? And this is what AJ has helped me about too, because he explained of how man's soul condition has degenerated over millennia, generation to generation. So we're left with the tab. We're actually born with the debt, so to speak, emotionally, and we don't understand it. And this is what he was saying about energetically, emotionally, where it's passed on from generations. So we're born with this error that's coming out of our soul, and we wonder why we're having a tough and hard life, and all this pain and grief we seem to be attracting or going in cycles is because it's already been installed like a download inside of us. So I understand he's up there and in a place called Summerland, and that you can talk and see loved ones or relatives in sleep state. But I don't remember a lot of my sleep state, apparently due to fears that I haven't dealt with. But it's really difficult because so much shame and guilt around that. Having a baby is supposed to be the most wonderful experience, but then to have ours go so terribly wrong, it was a home birth, and then I won't go into details, but then I was investigated for 4 hours, like within hours of the death, as a possible, it was a crime scene. I came home to get some clothes from the hospital, and then basically it was all my unit and everything was roped off as a crime scene. It was the worst experience of my life, but again, that represents the devastation that's already in my soul, and so I'm still trying to understand it all fully.
I found it extremely sad to hear that Jason felt responsible for such a tragic event. AJ believes many of Jason's views are in contrast with his teachings, and that Jason is unnecessarily blaming himself. AJ believes that Jason has a part to play in his son's death because he is his father, not because he didn't know about God. And there are also many other factors which would have contributed beside Jason. AJ told me the complexities of the Divine Truth belief system are not always fully understood by the people that follow them. I understand why tragic events are blamed on a loveless God. I was interested to hear how divine truth, a belief system based on love, can explain how such suffering can occur. How do you explain things like malaria and children dying of that?
Well, most of these diseases, again, are naturally occurring diseases which our body should be able to fight against as long as our body is in complete harmony with love. As long as we don't have emotions within us that have been usually imposed upon us by our environment that are out of harmony with love, our body will be able to fight any of these diseases and actually not even experience them in all cases. So whenever anybody experiences disease of any kind, it's because of the lack of love that's either that exists within the soul of the individual, that is usually caused by, and in case of children is always caused, by the lack of love in the parents and in society generally. So almost everything, well, everything that actually occurs, I'll just pull over here, inside of the body of any individual, anything that occurs inside the body of any individual occurs because of the environmental conditions that have created soul-based feelings inside of the individual that are out of harmony with love. Now, in the case of a child, usually those feelings have been caused by their parents or their immediate environment. As wide as there are possible emotional experiences causes the wide variety of diseases. So obviously every single disease has its unique signature emotionally as to what is its cause. Every single cancer, for example, the different types of cancer have specific emotional causes related to the location where the disease began. If a woman has cancer that begins in her left breast, then this is all about projections she has to women, and in particular it would have began with her mother, which is a suppressed rage, which is overcoming, which is over the top of an addiction, and the addiction is wanting women to do what she wants in order to receive approval from women. So if the cancer is in the right breast, then it will be with men rather than women. So even the predisposition of a family tree towards a specific type of disease is related to the family tree having a predisposition towards certain emotions.
We all understand that stress unchallenged causes detrimental effects on the body. So on a fundamental level, we understand that emotions can cause disease. This divine truth belief will, however, definitely confront many families who have lost loved ones to cancer. However, if what AJ is saying is correct, and science can prove his claims, then he could be holding the answers for a cure for all known diseases. It was reported in the media that AJ's mother was worried for him because she thought he may have mental health issues, an allegation I wanted to get to the bottom of.
Both mothers in my first century life and this life claimed that I had mental health issues. So my first century mother, Mary, claimed that I had mental health issues quite frequently. And often she claimed that to protect me, she felt, from people attacking me and finishing up killing me. In this life, my mother felt initially when I claimed that I was Jesus that I might have some mental health problem. Of course, I went along to the doctor and had a chat with him, and he was pretty much fine after I had a chat with him. And of course, my mother, by the 9-month time, felt that I didn't have any mental health problems, and she was quite regretful that she'd started the entire process.
AJ has 2 sons from a previous marriage. I was given a unique opportunity to hear what AJ's son Tristan thought about his father being Jesus.
I definitely believe it's Jesus. Even now, like if he said next day, "Oh, actually, I was all wrong. I'm not actually Jesus," I wouldn't be that upset. I'd feel a little bit weirded out because, I'm pretty sure he is Jesus. I think I'd start believing that he thinks he's wrong. But from the first time he told me, he was actually going through a lot of emotion himself. So for him, he was crying, and he was trying to process through a lot of grief, sadness, some of the memories of torture that he had, some of the fears he had of what's going to happen if he says he's Jesus. He was really scared about that, so he was in bed crying, screaming, shaking for it would be up to about 6 months, almost all day.
Yes, when I was 33 years of age, most people felt that I had Parkinson's disease. And the reason why is because I had so much fear inside of me that I would just shake like this constantly. My whole body would shake like this constantly. And as a result of that, almost anybody who met me would first ask me, "Are you all right? What's wrong with you?" When I was 33, I started processing through a lot of terror about torture-based events, actually. And I didn't put them in the Jesus basket. So in other words, I didn't attribute them to my being Jesus. I just realised that at some point in my past, and at that point in time I didn't even believe I had a past besides my 33 years of age. I realised that at some point in my past I'd gone through some fairly traumatic events. I didn't know what they were, but the memories were of people driving nails through my body and through my ankles and my feet and my wrists, and people torturing me in different ways, and like a big stake being driven through my hip on the right-hand side, and other things like this. And you know, I don't have any of those scars in my body at all now, and so I had no way of intellectually resolving why I was having these emotional experiences, but I just decided to feel them. And as I felt them, the terror disappeared, and eventually it got to the point where I had hardly any terror anymore, and I was nice and calm and no longer seemed to have Parkinson's.
It was another 7 years of processing these painful emotions before AJ came to the conclusion he was Jesus. I'm told that actually 7 couples have returned to Earth from the spirit world. Some are unwilling to reveal or accept their identities, and others are coming to terms with the memories they have.
Like if we did what we were doing, say, in America at the moment, where 70% of them are Christian and very, very militant, some of them, then it might not be as safe to do some of the things we're currently doing. And one of the 14 have been murdered, but the rest of the 14 are still alive. And therefore it's given us the best chance to teach divine truth as possible, assuming the different ones of the 14 decide to do that.
AJ's neighbour Dave, or Cornelius, his first century name, is one of the 14, and he's agreed to speak to me about his life in the first century.
I was born in Sicily as a little kid there, and just lived in a little house with a little sort of cottage, I guess you call it, stone one, with my parents and sisters. The sisters are two older sisters. And one day, just at the end of the day, some soldiers come and broke into our house, or forced their way in, I should say, I suppose, and held my father at the door with a sword, and 2 others, there's about 5 of them, they come in. I was just terrified and ran out to a little corner and just hunkered down, and they were coming. I didn't know why they came in for, and they were coming to grab me. I was just terrified. I remember weeing myself, and they come and took me away. And they took me to their garrison, where the army troops were. They just pretty much, I suppose, politically back then, they were actually expanding the empire quite savagely then too. And just started becoming the violent person they wanted me to be, and I became quite good at that. That was the only way I got love back then, or there was no aggro coming at me as much. If I became good, I got more acceptance, I guess. I had enough of being hurt. And it was in there for a long, long time. And I remember early teenage years, as you're sort of getting more in your sexual development, I used to have these old haggy women that would come along, and they'd take us to them, and the women would start playing with you and get you excited and stuff like that, and they'd have sex with you. And just like, it was gross, like they were horrible things. But you didn't understand what's going on in your body as well. You're having these exciting, like nice feelings for once. Often it's just been violence. And there's these nice feelings, and they'd have sex with you, and they'd just be really nasty to you. And oftentimes the men would come along and rape you anally as well then too. So it's just like this horrible experience that's not too nice. It's really confusing in your head as well. Like your body's experience is something nice and something just horrific after that too. And everything was just to mentally screw you up basically and just become a machine.
Cornelius is still come to terms with his first century existence. There are chunks of his life he is yet to remember, but he vividly remembers his final months on earth when he met Jesus.
And so one of my slaves was sick at that stage, and I took the slave to see this guy. I wanted to see what if he is who he is, to prove it to me. And he actually healed my slave and just gave me a lot of faith that what he was saying was true. It was my men that actually had to go, and me in charge of them, that had to go and do the execution basically, or the crucifixion as they call it. And, by the time we got up there to do it, and I was the one that was actually leading them and nailing him down to the post thing he was on. And I was going to had his hands pulled back to do it on his hands and his wrists, and he was just looking at me, and I looked at him, and I just couldn't do anything violent to him, because I could feel he's just different and he had love coming from him, and that was so rare in those days, and it's something that I was always looking for and had real faith in. And he'd already shown me that he actually, like all the things he'd done, I could see there's a lot of love in him. So I couldn't do it, couldn't be violent anymore, I just couldn't do it. And so I just walked off.
So they hung me like that and crossed at the wrist, because if they hung me through the hands, then my hands would tear apart and not bear the weight. But the weight could be borne much better by hanging a person through the wrists and nailing the feet crossed over, like so. And then they stood me up. Now, at that time, there's all this pressure, and because you're hanging like this, there's a lot more pressure than like this. There's no way to support yourself so much like this. So I tore apart quite rapidly.
Yeah, they found me and they took me to a main area, the main sort of public area, and they tortured me there for quite a long time. I embarrassed the whole Roman Empire by walking off, and they'd cut my penis off as well, and eventually ended up opening my stomach up as well, disemboweling me. And I remember just seeing the sky all the time. There's birds eating my stomach at that stage too, and just looking at the sky, and just felt a bit more peace, and realised the only bit of power I still got is I can choose to die. That's where I just ended up giving my last breath away, and that was it.
But as soon as I died, I could see everything, because I knew that would happen. So I knew that as soon as my physical body died, I could watch the proceedings. So I watched them spear me, break my legs. I watched, and it was just my body then. It's not me anymore.
I very much wanted to be present during the entire couple of days before his passing. He really didn't want me to be there because he felt that I was in danger, but I felt this is the person I love the most, and they're going through something really extreme, and I want to be there. And so I was, and I suppose that for him, he was in a really high state of love, and he didn't have fear. So he wasn't afraid of everything that was going on around him. But for me, it felt such an affront, I suppose, to the love that he did have inside of him. Here is someone who is so gentle and so wishing to love everyone and to teach beautiful truths about God, and someone without judgment, without violence within him, who was being basically tortured and humiliated. People were attempting to humiliate him in the worst kinds of ways. For a lot of us after his passing, it was as if this dream that we all had of bringing God's love to earth and showing people the power of that love was lost.
I had foretold to the disciples that, who were present, that I would return to them, so after my death, and I told them that I would return to them around 3 days or after my death. I calculated that time based upon how long it was going to take for me to decompose my own body out of the tomb, because I could hasten the decomposition process of my own body.
So how did you decompose your body?
And all I did was, I knew the laws involved with decomposition is about providing extra oxygen to the process. And in doing that, I finished up decomposing the body within 2 days.
How did you provide extra oxygen?
It's a matter of channeling energy. It's like if you can, right now, right, that your entire body is just really energy. You're not really a physical person. That the only reason why it feels physical is because our energy is dense, and therefore we're able to touch it. But it's actually vibrating energy. Electrons running around the nucleus is the understanding nowadays. But once you understand how the energy flows, you can start channeling or moving that energy from one location to the other location relatively easy. The problem in the tomb was that there was not much light available, and so all I did was provide all of those particular elements with the energy that I had from my own spirit body to speed up the entire process. So one of the things that I then did was I allowed myself to pull together matter in a very similar way that I pulled together energy in order to decompose my body. I could also pull together matter and form a body, and appeared to Mary first, 3 days later, basically.
Even though I had seen Jesus again after his passing, there was still a lot of grief going on for me and a feeling that we were separated. Even though in spirit he tried to be with me quite a lot, I was still grappling with this whole physical versus spirit world.
I was interested to find out more about the spirit world, a place, according to AJ and Mary, they spent over 2,000 years of their life.
Where is this spirit world?
Well, mathematically, they've proven that there are 13 or so concurrent dimensional spaces in the universe. Also, scientifically, they know that there's dark matter, which has a weight, and in fact, dark matter forms 90 to 95% of the known weight of the universe, but we can't see it. So there's all this matter that exists in another dimensional space that I'm referring to as the spirit world, but it's actually mathematically proven to be true, but people don't think of it that way. Does that make sense? So what people think of as heaven or hell or anything in between are actually the existence of multi-dimensional spaces in which our spirit body, can exist and reside. As you can imagine, if you passed into the spirit world today, you would still have the same loves that you currently have. So you'd still love your wife, you'd still love your child, and you'd want to let them know that you're still alive. That's one of the first things you'd probably want to do, right? And so most spirits, within a very short period of time, learn how to try to let their loved ones know that they're still alive and everything's all right and there's nothing wrong and all those kind of things. Now, of course, most of their loved ones are not in the space to hear that because they're grieving and they're upset and so forth. So they're not in the space to listen, but most people who've passed go, "You don't need to cry, I'm still alive," and so they learn how to move objects, for example, or so forth, in order to communicate something to their loved ones on Earth, to indicate to the loved ones on Earth that they are still alive and everything's fine. And eventually we could have a society where we don't even see death as a stop to our life. It doesn't hardly even impact upon our life at all.
So do you believe dinosaurs roamed the world?
Definitely. I know for certain because I've seen them in the spirit world. Everything that has a central nervous system on Earth, when it dies, it also has a spirit body, because at the time of conception, if there's a central nervous system in the physical body, a spirit body is also created for the same organism. So when you use as your primary function your spirit body, you can go to places where there are dinosaurs.
AJ is not alone with his views on the spirit world. I met up with Pete, who follows divine truth, but is also in close contact with spirits.
I think probably 2 or 3 was probably the first time I saw spirits. What generally used to happen, these spirits, I'd be going to bed like 3, 4, 5, 6, and they'd want to come and sit on the bed and have a chat. So, and some of them were really nice and some of them were really terrifying. As a child, your fear is that you're going to get overwhelmed with just thousands and thousands of people wanting to come and talk to you, and you're never going to be able to sleep for a start, because once you talk to one, then suddenly everyone knows that you can talk to them, and suddenly one after the other, they're coming for all different levels. These days with Google, like, it's awesome. You know, you can talk to a spirit and then Google it later. So I think at the moment as a world, like, we just don't realise actually the pressure that the average person is under from spirits who are constantly at them. You know, like, obviously there's a lot of good that comes from it, but, you know, we're totally oblivious to really what's happening.
How do people leave themselves open to be attacked by spirits?
Well, the easiest way to be open to spirits is when we don't want to be connected with who we are or our bodies. So anytime we're not wanting to feel our feelings, or we want to avoid. So often people that have had enough of life are sick of their job or sick of what's going on in their life. We get to a point where we just want to step out of ourselves. So often in those situations, that's when a spirit will come, yeah, I can help you, I can be part of you. So that often in those sort of times that happens. But probably more in the society we live in now, drugs and alcohol, like, that's the ultimate for a spirit. So if you think of all the greatest rock songs and all the greatest music that's been written on the planet, most artists have to, unfortunately, say that they were stoned or drunk or under the influence when they wrote their music. And generally all it means is that spirits in the spirit world are writing the songs for them. And that, you know, when they get into that state, it allows the spirits to be able to influence their writing and influence their craft.
Once a week, Pete and his fellow Divine Truth follower Fabio hold a channeling to help spirits. Over dinner, Fabio talked to me about their communications with the spirit world.
So we were channeling one day, and a person came to talk, and it was a young boy who was an actual suicide bomber. He actually bombed himself for some religious cause. And he strapped a bomb to himself, jumped on a school bus with young soccer boys, and blew the bus up. And what had happened is that his dad, that he had passed earlier, was influencing him to do these things through his thoughts.
While he was still alive.
While he was still alive on earth. And his father, already knowing the truth about what was really happening, still thought that it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Knowing that he wasn't going to go to this special place.
So his father basically wanted to kill all those children on the bus.
Yeah. And the other sad bit is that with him was the mothers of those children, because they were on the bus too. They were quite angry at him, and it just became this big interlocked mess of anger. And so we just helped him sort of understand that the spirit world is based on love, and that he could move to somewhere nicer, because after that has happened, my job's done.
Oh, that happened with Heath Ledger when he died. Wanted to talk through my girlfriend was a medium then, and just in the garden somewhere in Perth, and she said there's someone here, and she'd been sort of talking to him just generally, and so we had a chat about what had happened and everything. He's really confused about what had happened and everything too, and he wanted to let his parents know that he died and he's alright, and I didn't really feel comfortable I didn't even know where they lived, or I didn't even know he lived in, he's from Western Australia, I didn't even know he's talking about his child, Tilly. I didn't even know he had a child. Didn't even know a name, called her Tilly, which is Matilda, I found out. Yeah. So, yeah, it just feels odd to sort of, I don't want to walk up to some people I don't even know and tell them that your son's alright in the spirit world. I talked to him, I can't remember what I said to him about that, but there's more important things for him to sort of work out first and try to explain where he was, and he felt a bit differently about it later too. We spoke to him about 3 different times.
I found myself listening to things that before this documentary began, I would have disregarded out of hand. I wasn't being asked to believe or expected to. These were just genuine people telling me their experiences they have all shared. I wanted to find out whether, according to AJ, there is such thing as hell.
The hells of the spirit world are the first dimension. The very first dimension of passing is at the moment in quite a very dark condition. There's not much light there. They're often very smelly. There's not much autonomy because most people there do not understand the laws involved with movement of nature, of movement of matter and movement of themselves. And it is very much governed by the things they did on earth as to what's going to happen after that point. So if you do things on earth that are out of harmony with love from God's perspective, And in particular, if you chose to do those things on purpose, out of harmony with love from God's perspective, you will definitely end up in the hells of the spirit world. So a person, for example, let's say a person on earth murdered somebody, for example. And by the way, God's definition of murder is very different to our own. Well, if I can illustrate, from God's perspective, a person who aborts a child murders as much as a person who has committed a murder, on purpose. If they aborted the child on purpose, then from God's perspective, both are murders. Now, to get out of that location becomes the key question. How do I get out of that location? So we are not permanently assigned to that location. We're only assigned to a location, or our soul, in fact, the correct way to say it is our soul is attracted to the location because that's the location that best suits our current condition. In other words, a hellish location suits the hellish condition that exists inside the soul. And to get out of that condition, all we have to do is improve in our attitudes about love. In the hells, it's very dark and very grey, but as you progress, even in the first dimension, at the top of the dimension, it's very colourful, like it is here. In fact, it's very similar to here, the first dimension, at the top of the first dimension. It's very similar to what we see on Earth. And the second dimension is just like unimaginable for most people here on Earth already. It's far different to Earth. You have far more control over your being, your life, how you get around, everything. And so it's very, very, like a lot of people want to stay in the second dimension for a long time after they've been in the first dimension because it's so enjoyable, compared to the first.
Because I'm sure there's going to be lots of people that have had an abortion, that are watching this now, that are going to be terrified
angry
of what happens after.
Yes. Understand that we can always change our condition of love at any time. This includes while we live on Earth. And in fact, that would be my recommendation to all people, that anything that they've done that's unloving, notice what it was, choose to do something different now. Because if you don't do that now, you will be faced with those reasons when you pass. That's how God's created the universe.
When AJ talks to me about divine truth beliefs, something is either a truth or it's not. There is no grey area. I perceive AJ's view on abortion, that it is murder, very hard line. However, his belief is shared with many religious faiths that are widely practiced today. I am told that one of the reasons they have returned to Earth is to teach divine truth, a belief system based on love. As since his crucifixion, a large amount of religious distortion occurred, a claim that many religious faiths may find highly offensive. It can be quite offensive to lots of people.
Well, in the first century, what I said was often offensive to a lot of people. That's why I got crucified in the end. All I'm trying to do is say the truth, what I've discovered to be the truth of the universe to people. But of course, people have a whole set of ideas. They have a whole set of, what would you call it, sort of like preconceptions about what life should be. But also they have a whole lot of personal and political agendas and financial agendas that a lot of my teachings will confront. We see a lot of hypocrisy in religion, unfortunately. And one of the reasons why is because most religions have been created by people on earth to suppress and control other people on earth, and not to come to know God or come to have a relationship with God in the way God defines. And that's the big difference between what I taught in the first century and everything else that I observed from that point onwards.
AJ believes that God creates our soul, that our soul is pure, but degraded by the unloving actions of our parents, past generations, environment, and our choices. I'm told that Jesus became at one with God by cleansing these imperfections from his soul, and could therefore perform miracles and understand and teach others to be more loving from God's perspective. Since AJ's return to Earth, he tells me this process of cleansing his soul has to happen again. People that are sceptic about who you are, they say, well, why don't you just do a miracle?
Yeah, this is a common thing. Firstly, the logic of that question defies logic, actually. It's a totally illogical question. If a person can perform a miracle, the only thing it proves is that they can perform that miracle that they've performed. It doesn't prove their identity. If a person asked me to perform a miracle, in the first century, up until I was 30 years of age and at one with God, I could not perform any miracle. I chose to not perform any miracle, in fact, until that point in time. So I waited until I became at one with God. So, for example, if I met a blind person and I knew God's laws and the feeling within them allowed me to cure their blindness, and I wanted to cure their blindness and I had a desire to cure their blindness, then God's love could flow through me and cure their blindness. And so they could instantly see. So the only time I would perform a miracle anyway is if I felt that feeling of love for the individual enough to actually perform the miracle. And I was at one with God, which I know I am not at this point in time. And I don't know when I will be, because I've still got to work through some fears in order to become at one with God. And many of the so-called miracles that are listed in the Bible, I never performed. And in fact, nobody ever historically has performed, but they are legendary in other books besides the Bible. So, for instance, turning water into wine was something that Greek gods did before I arrived in the first century. And so therefore, I had to have turned water into wine so I could be compared to a Greek god, so that people would accept Christianity. And that's a shame, because I feel a lot more people would have accepted Christianity if just the truth had been taught.
It was the second day of the seminar, and I wanted to speak with more Divine Truth followers to help get a greater understanding of their choice of spiritual path, and to find out whether or not they actually unknowingly belonged to a cult.
I think I've been part of a cult before. I was part of a church, and I had a lot of rules and regulations about being in that church. You know, we weren't allowed to dance, we weren't allowed to gamble. And with AJ and Mary, there's, you know, if anything, they promote to you free will, but they explain to you, work out for yourself what's loving and what's unloving. You know, you'll feel the difference, and they're right, you do. You know, I don't know if you know, but I'm pretty mediumistic, and I practice mediumship. And it's been really nice to be able to talk to a person like AJ and Mary who can explain to me some of the things that I've had no answers for throughout my life. From you know, visions that I didn't understand, to addictions that I've battled and then tried to overcome.
Is there spirits around us now sort of helping with this or challenging in this interview?
Can you give me a minute to just feel about that? Yeah. I can feel my guide with me, just standing there. Probably because I feel a bit afraid. Our guides are really nice people, and they have a lot of love for us. And often just their presence makes us emotional.
So that's your spirit guide, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
The spirit guide. So is there anyone around Simon or I?
Yeah, I was nervous to say that. Yeah. I just need to take my focus off you for a second to just sort of feel. Yeah, you have a couple of spirit friends too. There is what feels like a man standing here, and there feels like a person either side of your cameraman.
Marion has recently turned to Divine Truth. She tells me that she's been plagued with spirits her whole life.
For me, this is fascinating because I hadn't met anybody that articulated how they felt about spirits and spirits going inside them and controlling them. So can you tell me What exactly happens and how do you change if a spirit is controlling you?
I've been shown phenomenal stuff from the spirits, such as an ancient henge, probably 350,000 years old, in Tasmania, and I've channeled a male Aboriginal spirit. So a man has spoken through my vocal cords. The positive side in some ways, and the negative side is being told you're made of titanium after you've crashed a car and sending you down a cliff and your face smashing in, your leg being ripped apart, and then thinking that you're fine, and going to the hospital and showing the doctors what's inside your leg, and like really warped stuff as well. And that's dangerous.
Is that an analogy or is that actual fact?
That actually happened, and then I went into a psychiatric hospital for a couple of weeks and some medication to kind of come down. So, you know, it can be extremely negative. The information that AJ and Mary, who are very advanced mediums, probably the most advanced mediums on the planet, the information that they've shared through their DVDs has enabled me to live. It's given me the will to live, and it's given me the strategies.
I'm beginning to understand why they have chosen this spiritual path. A chance to talk to their loved ones in sleep state, and knowing that your children are looked after in Summerland. An answer to questions that you had no hope of an answer. A hope for their future. I don't believe that to follow divine truth you have to start from a place of sadness, and many that I spoke to didn't. However, it sure does help those who do. If I speak to the divine truth followers, they all say it isn't a cult, and I don't believe it is. However, I'm not sure this actually tells me anything. I get the feeling that some of the followers wouldn't mind being part of a cult, not in a sinister way, but in a way they can all get guidance from a man who is only trying to help. AJ doesn't want to be a cult leader, and I don't think he is. However, his position puts him in a place of power.
There has been depictions of you as a cult leader, surrounded by women.
Yeah. Which every woman that knows me would laugh about.
Yeah. So, is there any truth behind what is said or what is shown or what is written?
No, none at all. I find it amusing, actually, because before I met Mary, I was celibate for 5 years. You know, we're like, now that I've found Mary, even if Mary left, I wouldn't engage in sex with anyone else.
And a lot of people imply that somehow I'm just one in a string of Mary Magdalenes, and you know that you sort of shop for women.
Because I've heard has there been 10? That's what I read. I read there have been...
AJ hasn't even had 10. Is that all right to say?
Yeah.
Partners in his life.
In my 2,000 years of life, I've had 4 partners.
To be compared to the Waco disaster, why would they do that, and how does that make you feel?
Well, the why is very different to how it makes me feel. If I answer how it makes me feel, because that's pretty simple, it doesn't worry me at all, actually. Because I know that we're not anywhere, nothing like that. I know I'm never going to encourage violence or in fact defend violence.
Or have a compound.
Or have a compound, or be guiding people in any way to have a compound that's separate from society or any of those kind of things.
Or own a gun.
Or own a gun, even. So, you know, the comparison is ludicrous from my perspective and doesn't warrant my, you know, it really doesn't warrant any emotion from me. And yet they still claim these things. And the reason why they claim it is because if they say there's this nice fellow who lives up in Queensland who's claiming to be Jesus, but actually we went along and visited him and he sounds pretty reasonable actually, and he sounds a pretty nice guy and he's not going to hurt you at all, then you wouldn't get too many listeners. Now, in the past, there have been people who have claimed to be Jesus who have done these things. You know, there have been people who have been sexually deviant who've claimed to be Jesus. There's been people who have been violent who have claimed to be Jesus and so forth. And so they then can play on these particular historical events and then put that onto the next person who claims to be Jesus.
Now, at some point in our future, there's going to be one person who claims to be Jesus who's actually Jesus. And I suggest to people that sooner or later, by the fruitage of the person, by what the person does, by the kind of ways they act, you will know who is the real one in the long term. And you won't know until then.
My time with AJ and Mary is over. From what the media have said about him, pays no reference to the man that I have met. I believe AJ has great power when he talks of divine truth. People do look to him for answers, and this power placed in the wrong hands could most definitely be dangerous. I understand where the media's fears have come from, but I don't think he's a man to be feared. If you say that you are Jesus, most will undoubtedly think you're deluded. Some will be offended, and a few will believe. The people that I have met have been nothing but kind. If this was a magnification of the world, then I reckon the world would be a much more loving place to live. As we talked, I felt a true sincerity in their words. For something which is so utterly unbelievable, their story is also extremely convincing. The details, the depth, their emotions, leaving me with more questions than answers. It is not for me to question people's belief systems, especially when it's a belief system based on love. Though I questioned whether AJ was Jesus, Mary was Mary Magdalene, questioned the spirit world, questioned whether or not Cornelius is part of the 14 that returned to earth. But what I think is not in question is AJ certainly believes he's doing it for the love of God.
You know how there's thousands of Elvis impersonators here on Earth? Well, there's even more Elvis impersonators in the spirit world. And so what they do is they impersonate him in their interactions with people on Earth. So they even, form, they dress up like he does, they try to look like he does and everything, just like the Elvis impersonator on Earth would do.